Failure to disclose. Um, this one gets a little tricky sometimes, but most real estate lawsuits arise because of a failure to disclose. As the real estate professionals, we must disclose anything about the property that could affect its value and desirability and advise our clients to do the same. This is part of what our Avid is for. Because if we see any material facts that we should be bringing to attention, that's what we're doing through that Avid. Honesty is truly the best policy in this case, obviously, even if the disclosure may affect the sale price or commission. When completing disclosures, I always tell my clients the state of California wants the buyer to know everything you know about this house. I don't care how far back it was, if it was 15 years ago and you were living here and you had a water leak, you need to disclose that. It doesn't, there is no limitation. The state of California doesn't give a limitation on, oh, well, if it happened past 5 years ago, you don't have to put it on the TDS. That's not true. If they know about it, they want the buyer to know about it. State of California does. So again, if you know it, you must disclose it. If you're questioning if it should be disclosed, you should disclose it. You never know what the neighbor is going to say to the new owner post-closing, so be sure the seller discloses properly. And I have a story about that where I took a listing. The home was maybe 4 years old. It was a fairly new home, and I sold that house. They had disclosed nothing was wrong with it. They're like, no, it's only a couple years old and everything's perfect, right? And the neighbor right next door calls me up a month later and says, hey, you sold their house over there. I want to sell mine too. I go over there, I'm at the listing appointment, and the new buyer has already moved into the house next door. And we're kind of chit-chatting about that. And they're like, oh yeah, did they tell you about that huge leak they had after they had moved in? And I was like, no, they didn't say anything about a leak. They're like, oh yeah, the upstairs bathroom flooded the entire living room underneath. The whole roof caved in, and they had to have the builder. It was still under warranty. The builder came out and fixed everything, but yeah, they had a huge leak there. And I was like, wow, that's a little scary actually, because you're already talking to the new neighbor, and that's all it would take for a claim to come up, is the neighbor next door saying something to the new buyer, and the buyer going, I had no idea about that. That wasn't disclosed to me. And boom, now you got a post-closing claim, and probably a valid one. So you really got to watch out. It's not just about will the buyer find out. It's if they start talking to the neighbors, what your neighborhood is. I mean, you know which neighbors are doing things and have had problems and all this stuff, and it's the same. So you really have to be mindful of what the neighbors are going to tell the new buyers. And that's, I don't want to call it a scare tactic, but that's an anecdote that I share with my sellers when they're filling out disclosures. I give them that little anecdote, and they're like, oh wow, that actually is very true. That makes a lot of sense. So, and they really like do a good job on the disclosures. So next up, making suggestions beyond your expertise. Probably all a little guilty of this because we're trying to help out our client, right? So only provide advice in the context of your role as the real estate professional. Don't ever make suggestions or recommendations to your clients which extends beyond your scope of expertise. For all other unrelated inquiries, legal issues, tax issues, etc., encourage your clients to undertake independent research and contact other sources or licensed professionals who specialize in the subject of inquiry for information. I think taxes are one of the biggest ones here. And I get questions from you guys a lot about, well, will they be subject to capital gains, or, how are they going to claim this on their taxes and this and that? And you'll find that I usually don't answer the question in a lot of detail because it's not my area of expertise. I am not a licensed CPA. And so I'm going to recommend to you to recommend to your client to go and seek that information, because you don't want to give them false information. It's not something that I keep up on day to day like a CPA would, and just like a CPA doesn't keep up with real estate law like I do. So don't be afraid to state that. Like, it would be best if you spoke to a tax professional about that. And some other things, this is stuff that, just comes out of our mouth a lot because, again, we're trying to help our client. And sometimes we forget that we are not, and some of you are licensed contractors, but that we're not licensed contractors, and there are things like that. So things that, some examples of statements that can be construed as advising on topics outside your area of expertise and should never be used. So, you're in the bathroom, those black spots behind the toilet are mold. Well, how do you know they're mold? If you've been in the business a while, you know they're mold, right? But we shouldn't say that. Instead, say something like, during my visual inspection, I noticed some discoloration on the wall behind the toilet. I advise you to seek further evaluation from a licensed professional. That crack in the stucco is probably caused from the house settling. Instead, say something like, during my visual inspection, I noticed some cracks in the stucco. I advise you to seek further evaluation, yada, yada. That open space behind the yard looks unbuildable, so your view will never go away. Instead, say something like, you should check with the city to verify zoning and buildability to ensure this view will be preserved while you live in the home. I had an example of that actually on a piece of land that I was selling, and it had thought to have been that there was an easement going through it to what looked to be BLM behind it, or it wasn't even BLM, it was preservation space. And it took a lot of digging in, and attorneys involved to really confirm that land behind this piece of land that my client was buying could not be built on, because it was deemed as preserved land. So they kept asking me about it. I said, do you really need to get an attorney and go down to the city and talk to them about this? Because I can't guarantee that that won't ever happen. And this easement runs right where you want to put your house. So post-tension slabs never crack. Instead, direct their questions about different slab types to a licensed professional, reputable online sources to answer their clients' questions. Here's a list of items you can write off to lower your tax liabilities. I wouldn't do that one. I'd refer them straight over to CPA. I've been on hundreds of home inspections, and that doesn't look like a big deal. Yeah, that I would never say that. I don't say that now, and I've literally been on hundreds of home inspections. And I still don't say that. When a client asks me, how serious is that, or how much is that going to cost to be fixed? Those are all very common things that come up. I can't really give them that answer because I'm not a contractor and I don't know what things cost. So that's when I say we should get, an electrician out to give us a bid on that. And when you get that bid, that actually helps with your negotiation efforts. When you go for your request for repairs, it gives you more validity to the amount of credit you're asking for. So you don't want to say things like that either, like, it's not a big deal, oh, it should only be $1,000, something like that, and it turns out being, $2,500, and now you got, your home buyer now is upset with you because you only negotiated $1,000 because you said, oh, it looks like, I looked online, it looked like maybe it's $1,000. Like, they probably should have gotten a bid from someone, to satisfy that. So it is the buyer's duty to satisfy themselves as to the condition and all aspects of the home. And so we want to keep pushing them in that direction of, if this is going to be a concern from you, then we need to further out evaluation from that specific licensed professional and to get a bid so that you can see, how serious this is going to be for you.